and that's okay. Like I personally think that has to be part of it, and Jared Goff has to be a guy who like Jared Goff has to be a guy you roll with if he plays really well, right? And that's not a reality in today's NFL, but I wish it was, right? I think a lot of teams would make more sound decisions about QB. I think QBs would have a much better developmental cycle if that were the case. And I think it's true about this last guy we're going to talk about, Thomas, which is Will Levis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will Levis, Kentucky quarterback, played in the SEC, had a much better year as his previous year's penultimate year than this last one.
Mm-hmm.
8.4 yards per attempt was actually fairly decent. 13 turnover-worthy plays. That's 83rd in college football. 8.68 out, which is not that high. 101st. So he's a shorter thrower guy.
Mm-hmm.
People do laud his athleticism, as you're going to talk about, and his arm strength. Adjusted completion percentage was 31st, 75.6. Here's a couple what I would consider to be worrisome statistics. So 26.8% of his pressures turned into sacks. That was 137th in college football. He was one of the worst college football players when he was pressured at avoiding sacks. That's not a great statistic from college to pro. And he only took 2.58 time to throw, which means like he's not back there running around and getting sacked. He's kind of getting sacked early in the down, which, that's in my opinion, just as somebody who doesn't evaluate, I don't pretend to, but like that to me, if I'm looking at the statistics, is a guy who maybe early in the down is not processing things as well as he should be. Do those things come out when you watch Will Levis on film, Thomas?
They do come out, and it is a legit concern, no question about it. I know there's been talk out there about people are beating him up too much. He had injuries, et cetera, right? But the reality is, as an organization, you really, really have to drill down on that to figure out where that's coming from. Your comments there with what you just mentioned are, massively important to me, right? I love his presence, right? Just his movement and his ability. He's a strong guy, right? I've said this time and again. He's got a confidence level about him, right? He's going to take anyone on. I like that part. I think that's an important part of a quarterback in the National Football League. And yet, in the end, if you're worried about his accuracy, if you're worried about his decision-making, we know that you're not getting around that. And that is not getting better in the National Football League, right? So that's where my concerns are when I start really honing in on Will. Now, I want to watch more because I want to see where he was pressed in certain games that I didn't necessarily get to. When you start talking about 2.58, what'd you say, 112th longest? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so he's one of the quicker throwers in college football.
Quicker throws. I love quick throwers, man. Right? I used to say to our offensive coordinator in Atlanta, when they put Matt in that spot, Matt was throwing beyond 3. It used to drive me bonkers. Right? What are we doing? Yeah. To have someone like this get the ball off like he can, I like. But your reasoning there about how that is a concern for you is, again, it's eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, and there's one more piece of information on him that I think is a little concerning when I think about Will Levis, just like from there's a couple. When you look at him throwing outside the numbers, he was 3 of 8, only 3 of 8 from 10 to 19 yards throwing to the right outside the numbers, and he was only 2 of 4 throwing outside the numbers to the left between 10 and 19. Those are. And Tej Seth wrote about this at SumerSports.com, by the way. A ton of great content at SumerSports.com on the web, on our website, as well as Twitter. Find us there. Great, I think, article content. He was just 1 of 12 throwing outside the numbers over 20 yards last year. And I get worried, right? And deep ball accuracy is somewhat your wide receivers and somewhat the quarterback, but when you're talking to me, he only completed 4 passes over 10 yards outside the numbers to his on-ball hand side last year. I get a little worried. And then lastly, and this is I think where a lot of people are concerned. So from a clean pocket last year, he had 9 turnover-worthy plays, and he had just 4 when pressured. So that means like the majority of his mistakes happened when no one was pressuring him. Like, those are free throws, right? Like, no one's pressuring him. He's making the majority of his mistakes. I get worried about that because we talk about it. When the table's set for you, I need my quarterback to be automatic, right? I need him to knock down shots when the whole thing is sort of out in front of him that way. And with Levis, it was a little bit dicey there. And so I think a lot of that corroborates a lot of the concerns that people have.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's, as you said, arm strength. He has that way about him. Like, I think a quarterback has to command a huddle. I think he's got to be a tough guy. I think he's got to be big and strong, all this stuff. But there's some real concerns about him from a production standpoint.
And when you start talking about building a team and you start talking about in the top 5 or 6 or wherever he might go, again, another difficult decision. And if you're pushed by this incredible need and you're thinking, what else are we going to do? I'm telling you, I know the conversations in the building. It's hair pulling for general managers and head coaches at times because they're what we do in the NFL is we beat the hell out of someone, right? We beat him down. And then, this sounds odd, we have to build them back up, right? So that we can justify drafting someone like this. Because believe me, there's been a lot of beating down on him. And so I just will be, it is the way of the world in the NFL, right? That idea of building him up enough to say to your owner after you've picked them and, maybe 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever it is, that again, you're able to justify that. I don't want to beat that point up, but it happens all the time. And it is an unnerving situation when you're thinking, this is what's left and we have to take this person because we need a quarterback. And I'm not just picking on Will, far from that. I think he's got a lot of good traits, but we're still concerned about what we just have already talked about. So you pull him off the board, on Thursday, and it's prime time, and you're trying to, raise the roof, and you're thinking in the back of your mind, we have a lot of work to do with this guy to make sure that we create the right situation for him to thrive, and hopefully that's thriving for a long time, or we're going to obviously be in a world of hurt.
William Jones had a great question. Levis had a great junior year and a poor senior year. What do we think of that from an analytics or evaluation perspective? We have had situations where guys have gotten worse as they progress. Justin Herbert's a positive example. Frankly, Brock Purdy's a positive example. He was much better first couple years when he was at Iowa State than his subsequent years, and was, has had a good pro career so far for San Francisco. When I was at PFF, we did that analysis a little bit. It wasn't, there's so few quarterbacks that get taken, so there wasn't really a definitive answer, but that is something to consider. Like, the question is like, did the SEC figure him out, and then, or was there an injury? Like, I think a lot of times an injury will really, affect a player, and you have to, like, that's stuff that you have to do your due diligence on, frankly, Thomas, right? Like, and that's, you guys pay a lot of money for that.